and he apparently was the only one hit. Suge Knight said he sustained just a graze wound, and he's a bigger target than Tupac Shakur.
Right, sitting right next to him.
Yes, sir. And then, of course, after the death of Tupac, we saw those who said that they could identify those who shot and killed Tupac, and they subsequently were shot and killed and murdered. And even just recently, one of Tupac's, I think, bodyguards lost his life, right? So talk about that.
Sadly enough, the next person killed, and not so coincidentally, at the next Mike Tyson fight, Tupac's backup singer, Yafu Fula, called Gaddafi on stage. He was in the Outlaws. His father was Sekou Odinga, who had founded the Bronx Black Panthers and was very close, of course, with Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur. He's an imprisoned radical, left-wing radical.
That's right.
And Yafu Fula said he thought he could identify the shooters.
Right.
The police, of course, said publicly that they didn't have anyone come forward that could identify the shooters. They lied.
Right.
And Yafu Fula maintained that he could. Normal police procedure, according to investigating reporter Kathy Scott, is that you detain all witnesses and you interview them and you take down their interview. They didn't detain anyone. They wouldn't even allow them to give an interview. So and then at the next Mike Tyson fight, there's 2 bullets end up in Yafu Fula's head. And there's been all kinds of conjecture on what really happened to him. Of course, the media will tell lies and say that it was a broken up drug deal, but Yafu Fula had no criminal record whatsoever. He wasn't involved in any broken up drug deals. All the evidence shows that it was a hit. It was a police hit. Even the FBI's own files that came out just within the last year or two on Biggie Smalls ended up having a police detective say in those FBI files that this looked like a professional hit on Yafu Fula. Now, most recently, within 3 days of them announcing that Sada Shakur was going to be the first woman put on the FBI's most wanted list for terrorists, 3 days before that, Frank Alexander ended up dead with a bullet in his head. He was in the car with Yafu Fula that saw Tupac get killed. Suge Knight, or actually it was really Reggie Wright, his head of security. He was supposedly a former cop, but we think he was still, of course, working for police. He ordered the security to not have any guns in Las Vegas and made up an excuse for why none of the security was allowed to have guns in Vegas.
Almost similar to what we've seen throughout the book and throughout, of course, our movements, where you would have those who say, don't bring your guns, don't bring your weapons, or even in the case of Brother Malcolm, don't check the people, because it reminds them of when you were in the Nation of Islam. So the day that he doesn't do a check, men come in with guns to snuff out the life of Malcolm X. Please continue.
Yes, definitely. And so Frank Alexander was filled with all kinds of remorse after he watched Tupac get killed in front of him. He's supposed to be security. So he ended up producing 2 movies called Tupac Assassination. And in those movies, he does a good job of implicating the police officers working for Death Row Records as orchestrating Tupac's murder. Now, he doesn't go as far as my book to say that U.S. intelligence was behind Tupac's murder, but he does go far, very far, in implicating the police working for Death Row Records. And so he got he got a bigger stage, being so close to Tupac in his life. He got a little bit of a bigger stage than I got for my book and film, and I think that's one of the reasons that he may have ended up dead within the past months. And of course, sadly enough, then the Sada Shakur is put on FBI Most Wanted list for a situation where she was set up and shot, and the evidence all points to that it was an attempt to kill her, and that she didn't have nothing to do with the police getting shot. It was an ambush on her and Zaid Shakur, who was Mutulu and Lumumba Shakur's brother, who got killed in that incident. And Zaid Shakur was forced to start the Black Liberation Army and co-found it with Sekou Odinga and others because they chased him underground. They tried to kill him for being a Black Panther, and he was forced just to fight back in self-defense and start the Black Liberation Army to protect the neighborhoods and protect other Black activists. So I argue that the evidence shows that they were ambushed and they just fought back and shot back, and so Zaid, possibly, or Quasi Balagoon, whoever it was, might have shot back and hit a cop, but it wasn't Asada by all evidence. She had no gunpowder on her hands, and so they tried to frame her on 6 other charges before that, and none of them stuck. And then they finally got her on that one charge, and then of course they blamed Mutulu Shakur and others with breaking her from prison, which could have been true,
right.
of course, but it was they call it a multinational task force that broke her from prison. It was former young lords, members of the Weather Underground,
That's right.
mostly white revolutionaries,
right.
and the Black Liberation Army members that helped break Assad Shakur from jail and get her down to Cuba to safety, thank God.
Yes.
And of course, but they put Matulu in jail for that, and another crime that they say he wasn't involved in, he just conspired to be involved in. And he's in jail, for decades now.
That's right.
And that was, of course, Tupac's stepfather, who we knew the most as his father.
Yes, sir. Again, family, just tuning in, having a conversation with John Potash, author of the book, The FBI War on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders. Of course, I think we said at the top of the show they can pick this book up at Everyone's Place Bookstore,
Sure.
Expressions Bookstore.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Are there any other locations here in the Baltimore metropolitan area? Red Emma's carrying this book?
Red Emma's is hopefully still carrying the book.
Okay.
I think they are. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Well, we definitely need more bookstores.
But nobody's helped me out as much as you, Brother Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
With getting the word out on this, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I don't know what's happening with the white left, but
yes,
here in Baltimore, Red Emma's, I'm glad they're selling it.
Right.
Never gave me an ounce of promotion, but that's okay.
Yes, sir.
But they still do good work in selling a lot of good books, and I've defended them in the city paper when they've been attacked.
Right. Thank you.
But I think my presentations with you, Brother Muhammad, has finally broke some of the media censorship in terms of after about the fourth time we did a presentation together, a writer named Brett McCabe in the city paper, finally, I kept sending him notices, sending him, send him a book, send him a film, and so he finally said, I'm sorry I haven't been doing anything with this. I'm going to, finally, interview you and write an article on this.
Right.
And then, sadly enough, he had been working at the city paper for 4 to 5 years. Within a year of him printing that article interview with me, he was laid off.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know if it's just coincidence or not, but it's too bad.
Yes, sir. Well, as we're talking about this, let's kind of expand the envelope a little. And I got to say, I always think, as I always say when we do these interviews, Brother Arnold Mitchell, who, of course, is the sensei and karate instructor that I think was an instrument for us coming together. Your beautiful wife, of course, who's one of his students there, one of his masterful students, so got to make sure we shout her out. And, of course, my brother, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr., Brother Professor Griff, and Brother Jared Ball, because I heard you on the airways with Brother Jared, and then I heard you on with Brother Nati, so it was always, as they say, 3 times the charm. So I knew once Arnold called me and told me about you, I said I had heard you but hadn't reached out to you. So just want to make sure that I kind of always connect those dots in terms of how we're able to kind of be brought together. But talk about Brother Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. and the work that he's continued to do before we bring it on home and talk about, as we looked at the death of Tupac and others, and we see almost the same scenario laid out with the death of the grandson of Malcolm X, Malcolm Shabazz. But talk about Brother Chairman Fred before we get into Malcolm Shabazz.
Well, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. is doing incredible work, of course, around the Prisoners of Conscience Committee. They've attacked him again and again, and he's survived. But he's got people working all over the country doing good organizing for the Prisoners of Conscience Committee. And I hooked up with him through Pam Africa, who was the head of the Free Mumia movement. And so she introduced me to him, and then he ended up giving a poem as an afterword for my book. And so I, of course, advertise his group in my book because he is a great legacy of the great Chairman Fred Hampton of Chicago, Illinois, who they killed at about 21 years old. But he did such incredible work and made so many great connections with other great activist group that he'll always be remembered. And Fred Hampton Jr. is following in his legacy. He's an incredible speaker. When Brother Muhammad had him here in town, he just enlightened everybody to so many machinations going on and so much good work that we can do to counter those machinations, but also to liberate our people, liberate everybody.
That's right.
He continues to educate around the country and around the world. He's got connections everywhere. People respect him all over the world. And I just, I think, if people want to get hooked into a great national movement besides just the great local movements that Brother Muhammad talks about, get in touch with the Prisoners of Conscience Committee.
Yes, sir. Well,
and Malcolm Shabazz, you're asking about,
let's talk about Malcolm Shabazz, because we see almost the same similar scenario again, isolation, and then the isolation, the elimination, and then you create the confusion around murder so that you can never properly, I think, connect the dots, uncover the plots, and then point out, of course, the perpetrators who snuffed out our young brother's life.
Well, I first found out about something going on early on against Malcolm Shabazz when Brother Muhammad, you invited me to introduce Fred Hampton Jr. and Malcolm Shabazz, and that was in Baltimore about 2 years ago.
It's about 2 years ago.
And Malcolm Shabazz didn't show up.
Right.
So, Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. found out that there was an infiltrator in his group.
That's right.
And he thinks,
sadly
enough, J.R. Valerie was an infiltrator. And it was sad to hear because I felt like I was fooled by him too. I thought he was legitimate. I mean, I did wonder why he kept saying he was going to interview me for something going on in San Francisco. He never did, but I still thought maybe he just was too busy. I didn't know if anything else was going on. But when he stopped Malcolm Shabazz from coming to that legacy tour, not just in Baltimore with us,
countrywide. It was going nationwide in terms of the legacy tour.
He was sabotaging, their tour nationwide, and that was the final straw, of course, for Fred Hampton Jr. And he, of course, kicked JR out of his group and exposed him and told all the reasons why. But Malcolm Shabazz, he was targeted from age 12, I argue.
Yes, sir.
And here's how. First, what they did is they set up an undercover agent, an undercover FBI agent to romantically get involved in Malcolm X's daughter, Kobila Shabazz.
And let me just kind of dive in. And this is not anything new. In your book, you point out how the FBI have encouraged, of course, agents and infiltrators and provocateurs to marry or to get involved romantically with those in the movement, from the black, brown, red, yellow, and white. Didn't make a difference, but this has always been part of their ploy and part of their policy to do this and get in long-term relationships, if you could, so that you could take the man or the woman who was committed to the mission off of their mission. So please continue.
Right. And just a few quick examples of it was the head of the Vietnam Veterans Against the War was they put an agent as his girlfriend who partnered with him, and then found out she was an agent. She sabotaged his work. I argue it was done with Huey Newton, the founder, of course, the Black Panthers, and it was done with Afeni Shakur, I argue, where they put an agent in her life to get her hooked on crack. But you can see that evidence in the book and the film. But with Malcolm X's daughter, it came out in the New York Times. This guy came out in trial saying he was an agent. This is known. This is, a given. And so he set her up to make her think that it was the Nation of Islam behind her father's death, and then say, well, now let's conspire to kill Louis Farrakhan. And so it all came out in court. She ended up getting sentenced to drug treatment. She got sentenced to other things. I think she got probation. But the top thing was, in my mind, about Malcolm Shabazz, they took her son away from her.
That's right.
And at 12 years old, to be taken away from your mother and placed in your grandmother's home, that's very traumatic.
Right.
And so they don't talk about that when they talk about Malcolm Shabazz's recent death.
Yes.
All they'll talk about is the fact that he acted out in that situation, and so he thought at 12 years old, if he acts out, and he supposedly lit a fire in his grandmother's home.
Allegedly, yeah.
Allegedly, and we don't even know if that's so true, and that's worth exploring more.
That's right.
But they say that's what he did, and I heard him in a talk say that he wanted to try to get back with his mother, and he was going to be mischievous or do something bad, hoping that they'd send him back to his mother.
Right.
But of course, they could have been watching him carefully, which they probably were.
Sure.
And then whatever he did do, they probably magnified and used that as an excuse, to maybe magnify the fire. But I don't know. But Dick Gregory obviously speaks to that, and I'm glad he does. But either way, then they put him in jail for that, or boarding school, with some kind of detention, like juvenile detention after that. And so they act like he was a career criminal,
right?
And so he was a troubled child from the start. When they messed his mind up, purposely with all kinds of operations.
Right.
And then when he gets out of jail, he's so resilient that he becomes a serious activist, and he's speaking about good activism for the world, just like his grandfather was.
That's right.
Throughout the country and throughout the world.
That's right.
And so he's traveling to Lebanon to talk about different activist causes, and the FBI arrests him as he's going to Lebanon for no reason. You know, and then after that, he knows that the FBI is spying on him. There's, you know, other people were saying on a recent talk show I was on that that